So we'd like to thank everybody for coming. This event is sponsored by AECT's Design Development Division. I do want to say our 2021 convention will be November 2nd through the 6th. And I know many of you are designing and developing some pretty awesome projects. So we really encourage you to submit a proposal to describe your project so that everybody knows what you're doing. I'm going to put the link in the chat, but then also feel free to reach out to either Daisy or myself if you have any questions. So to get started, we have asked the panelists to describe the following: their project management experiences, experience with teaching project management to new IDs, recommendations for IDs who are interested in leading and serving in managerial roles, and then project management experience needed for job searches. So first I'd like to introduce Colleen. Colleen Griffiths is a learning program manager at Amazon and has 7 years experience in learning and development field. She currently oversees training for 9,000 employees worldwide. Colleen's authored a chapter in learning management systems, choosing the right path for your organization. She has an MS in instructional technology, an MA in history, and they're both from UNC Wilmington. She currently lives in Seattle, Washington. So I'm going to go ahead and let Colleen speak, and then I'll finish doing the introductions as we go through. Colleen, thank you so much for your time.
Hi, thanks, Sherry. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, as Sherry said, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be around the world. I'm a learning program manager at Amazon. I've been with Amazon for about 4.5 years now. I'm responsible for a portfolio of learning related to a case management system, and I mainly train internal employees because I work for HR for Amazon. But my learners are located all the way around, all across the globe, and so I get a variety of learning requests. I'm happy to be here and to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you. So Annie Lee is BS. She has a BS in education from Campbell University, a master's in education from Gardner-Webb University, and her thesis was on scientific literacy and the strategies needed to build a scientifically literate society. In addition, she's completed 2 fellowships with UNC's Institute for the Environment, one in climate change and the other in energy and electricity. She's taught high school and middle school science for 9 years. At her STEM school, she had students complete engineering projects, one of which was to design, develop, and build and launch hydroelectric generators in the Neuse River. Annie joined the Division of Air Quality almost 2 years ago. In this role, she is the lead in writing a new curriculum in energy and energy technologies. She's on the leadership team for the NC Climate Education Network and is the head of the Microgrid Renewable Energy Program, Education Program. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mike as well. So Mike Johnson is the teaching and learning consultant and lead academic technology consultant at Brigham Young University's Center for Teaching and Learning. He has also worked as a senior ID and developer at the center. Before arriving at BYU, Mike worked as an instructional designer and curriculum developer in the financial industry for 4 years. He earned a master's in instructional technology at Utah State University and a PhD in instructional psychology and technology from BYU. So as you can see, our panelists have a very diverse background, and I think that will be very helpful to see the variety of experiences that each of them have. So the panelists are going to, talk for approximately 15 minutes, and then Daisy's keeping track of any questions that you may have, and then we'll have the last 15 minutes of the hour to open questions to all the panelists. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our panelists. Mike, would you like to start with your talk? And I made you all co-hosts, so if you have to share, you should be able to, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be right here.
Okay, well, it's good to get me out of the way. That way we can kind of ramp up in quality. That's great. So I am going to share my screen here. Let's see. Few thoughts on project management. So as as mentioned, my background is I was working as a curriculum developer in the financial industry and got my master's at Utah State University. And during that time, I led a small team of other curriculum developers in developing various trainings, especially new hire training and things like that. Then I moved to Brigham Young University to do instructional design there. At various points, we had specific people designated as project managers, and other times we didn't. So my project management roles would vary depending on whether or not we had those people, official project managers in the organization. So my my role as project manager has never been officially titled project manager, just always, well, you're the ID, so you're kind of leading this project kind of thing. But I have done quite a bit. So I wanted to start off in answering the last two questions. Like what are important skills for instructional or for project managers, and what kinds of things you want to have on your resume going into a job search for positions as a project manager or as a instructional designer who may have project management responsibilities. I want to talk about things that I've seen that get you from this, from Grumpy Cat's assessment of working as a team, into more of this Emmett version of teamwork, right? So I'm going to provide you my list of skills and characteristics of great project managers. Okay. So indulge me a little as I do that, and I will try to keep this brief so that you can hear from the more illustrious panelists. Well, first of all, this is some of you may know Dave Wiley, who was just elected as the president-elect of the organization of AECT. He and his students put together a book on project management. There's a link to it right there for instructional designers. And these are some of the skills they talked about, credibility and creativity as a problem solver, tolerance for ambiguity and flexible management style, effective communication, interpersonal skills, technical expertise, administrative skills. And I think all those are exceptional skills to have, and you absolutely should have them. And I would add, even though they're not explicitly stated there, risk management and change management skills, right? You want to minimize risks and know how to deal, because every project is going to have requests for changes as you go along. Just, it's part of life. Okay. But that's kind of, a lot of that gets into, of course, effective communication and interpersonal skills are there, but really project management is a people, working with people, and helping people achieve kind of their best. So the first skill that I want to mention is you need to be an advocate. And there's going to be times where you need to be an advocate for the client. There's going to be times when you need to be an advocate for the team. There's other times you're going to be and need to advocate for the stakeholders and for the project. I just an example I have is there was a time when our bosses were trying to kill off a project that we already had a lot of sunken costs into, which there is a time and place where you say, okay, we've already sunk this much into the project, it's not worth going forward, and that's fine. But in this particular case, we'd actually spent several years on the project, not every day, all day long, but over a long period of time, trying to figure out how to do a specific thing. And they wanted to kill it once we actually figured out how to accomplish what we were trying to accomplish. And so in this case, I had to advocate for, first of all, for the clients and for the project itself. And in my view, it was because we had, as an organization, made a promise to complete this project, and I could finally say we figured out how to do it, and that turned out to be the case. And really, I won't go into that anymore. I'm gonna say that you need to gain emotional intelligence, and that, as you can see, Napoleon here, you need to be self-aware, self-regulated, motivated, and empathetic, as well as having social skills and being able to pull out the best in other people, to be able to read them and work with them. I've had experiences where people on the team almost came to fisticuffs over disagreements about projects, and so being able to settle people down and bring them back to what's really important is a critical skill. Usually project managers don't have like specific authority, as it were, and so you need to learn to lead without authority, right? And so I like this little goal here. The goal of leadership without authority is to get others to willingly cooperate and engage rather than following directives because you're the boss. And as a project manager, that really, in most cases, or at least most cases that I'm familiar with, and certainly every case that I've been involved in, I've never had the authority. I've only had the responsibility, right? And so some of you may be familiar with the work of Patrick Lencioni. He talks about 5 dysfunctions. Flip these on their head. Instead of absence of trust, build trust. And by trust, he talks about, teammates being able to come to each other and be vulnerable enough to ask for help when they need it. Okay. Be able to have productive conflict and allow all voices to be heard, because when people are heard and feel a part of the process, they're more likely to then come into this next thing and be committed to what is collectively decided. And then instead of you feeling like you have to hold everybody responsible as project manager, you can build a culture of accountability, of mutual accountability in the culture, and focus on doing your best work and being focused in on results. Okay, I'm almost done, don't worry. And then I'm going to say leverage the happiness advantage. So I've also got a list of these resources if anybody's interested in these things. But if you're not familiar with Sean Acor's work, I'd recommend starting with his TED Talk. But when we're happy, we work better. He quotes in his book, doctors, when they're happy versus neutral or negative, they're actually like 19 to 20% more likely to make accurate diagnoses and see things on x-rays and things like that they don't otherwise see because they're happy. Teams, generally speaking, are more productive when they're happy. Now, does that mean you have to be giggly and flighty and all that kind of stuff all the time? No, but you can do things to help raise happiness levels. Also, he talks about seeing the good instead of always looking at things through a filter of what's going wrong, right? So find out what's going well on the team and help people feel good about that. But there's going to come time when things aren't going well, and so providing feedback with radical candor is a great way to go. So that implies that you challenge the person directly to improve, but you do so out of a place of caring, right? Because you care about them, you care about the team, you care about the progress of the project. And then, let's see, was that my, yeah, just remind you of Katzenbach and Smith's definition of a team. A small number of people with complementary skills committed to common purposes and performance goals and approaches that hold themselves mutually accountable. I kind of hit upon some of those things already, but if you remember that that's your goal as a team, then you don't have to be this kind of project manager. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mike. I think you've given us a lot of good things to think about, especially when hiring or changing jobs. So everybody give a big round. Thank you. And so now I'd like to introduce, but Annie, if you'd like to take the floor.
Sure. Good afternoon. As I mentioned before, I'm the educator. So a lot of my background is working with very hormonal teenagers and collaborating with them. A lot of the same things that Michael mentioned, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the very similar same skills and abilities. Within my background, I'm going to talk about primarily one big thing. When I had my 8th graders build these hydroelectric generators that started, in the fall, and it was a project that carried all the way through with 110 kids. The ability to create community and the ability to, yes, you are the project leader, and yes, you are the one that is responsible, but the ability to be able to highlight an individual's own potential and to be able to encourage that. And going back to that positive feedback that helps so much with creating safety, so that when something does go awry, because something always goes awry, there is ability to criticize, but in a kind fashion, and so that you know where the weak parts are within the people that you're working with, so that you can then move into a space of coaching and I use the word lovingly, pull them back in the direction of where the overall goal is and what you're really focusing on. Multiple times throughout my career, there's been a thing of, is this project worth moving forward on? And that was certainly the case. Currently in my job, I do a lot of online trainings. I'm in charge of our energy training as well as our air quality online trainings for teachers. And there's come multiple times, especially in the last year, of, do we keep moving forward on this? Is this where we really put our energy? What is really the benefit overall? Is it worth the time and effort? And there have been a lot of times where, you do have to go to bat for your project, or you have to go to bat for the other people that you were working with. And part of this, a huge part of this, is knowing looking at the bigger picture, stepping back, holding that kind of witness space of the bigger picture, and figuring out whether or not it is worth advocating for, or if you intelligently drop it and let it go, which is not easy to do. And that's where, being responsible is can be really difficult. It also means holding everything a little bit more lightly, so that you can make the bigger picture calls that really don't have as much to do with you and your personal attachment to it, but more of what is better for everyone involved. The biggest resource and the thing that we're most limited on is our time. So making sure that there is time management is going to be your biggest, or I found, especially within my project, has been, one of the biggest things, and not necessarily holding it that everything has to happen exactly in a certain way and exactly at this date, but wanting to set certain goals that are realistic and that can actually be met. And if something needs to be adjusted, as will always happen, also allowing some flexibility within that. So kind of time management as in goals, not necessarily time management as in, hard and fast rules, but being consistent with it. I find that being in this role is also about confidence. You have to be confident, even in just your own ability, that you can figure it out. Confidence isn't necessarily Knowing that you know everything all the time, but having confidence in your own abilities to find the right answer, to help your teammate search and find the right answer, to your abilities to coach someone else through their own parts and pieces of what is holding them back. To go into that, letting your, unfortunately, it always seems that when you're, or very fortunately, depending on your perspective, as you work with other people and as you manage other people, a lot of times your weaknesses are brought out because they catch them. And especially with me and hormonal teenagers, they're particularly vocal about exactly what you did wrong or what you could have done better. And rather than taking that information and letting it hit you really hard, taking that information as just information and growing yourself through that so that you can become, a better manager, so that you can become better and part of that overall team. That doesn't necessarily mean that though you're part of the team that you don't hold really, really strict boundaries on. You don't want to become so enmeshed with your other coworkers or your students or whoever it is that you let your personal time erode away from you. That you let that time management, that you don't let time just erode away, but really staying disciplined and holding to exactly what is needed or what is needed and necessary at the time. I want to kind of wrap up with, just that, again, that accountability of being really positive. Learning to delegate. My role, particularly most of my career being the teacher, it felt like the teacher had to do everything. And one of the biggest struggles that I had was really delegating out well. And it's interesting that now I'm in a job where most everything, is up to me to delegate. And I was very thankful to have those years of learning how to do that, especially when it felt in teaching that was not encouraged, and to now be in a role where, personally, I had taken that and had redone my classroom, especially when I've got all these students that are engineering their own projects, to putting the responsibility on each student to track their own information and to build their own designs. And then ultimately holding them responsible as we're standing along the Neuse River to hold themselves accountable in their behavior and collecting their data. But now, to really do the same thing, but on an adult level. And again, giving those tasks and entrusting that other people are going to get their work done and that they're going to meet the standard that you have set. So clear communication on all of those fronts is really, really important. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Annie. And I love the variety. Everybody, nice hand. Okay, and for our last panelist, and then we'll open up to questions. It can be either through the chat, or you can just, if you could raise your hand, that way we don't have people talking over. But our last panelist, thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, just had to unmute myself. All right, let me share my screen. Let's see. Share, okay. All right, you guys should be able to see a PowerPoint. Are you able to see it? Okay, perfect, excellent. So before I jump into this, just briefly my background, so you can kind of see how my role has evolved over time and different positions I've had at Amazon. So I started out working at Amazon with the Amazon Web Services as a training publisher, and where I would just get courses handed off to me that are finalized, and I would just publish them to an internal LMS, and I would just manage them. From there, I got a job with Amazon HR as an instructional designer, just managing smaller projects like this with maybe a single or just really small deliverables. But then that role grew into my current role, where I am now a program manager, the learning program manager, where I am leading the worldwide learning program with all kinds of deliverables that are deployed all around the world. So if you're thinking about doing something with, asking yourself, does instructional design and project management, do they go together? Does that make sense as a career for me? Absolutely. You can definitely go on that path if you want to. But some of the things that I've learned along the way, I thought I wanted to share with you. And I'm sure that my fellow panelists are very familiar with some of these situations. But the first, I would say, the key tip is as a project manager that you'll run into time and again, you always want to identify what the actual problem is. A lot of times my clients will come to me with a solution already in mind. They'll say, well, I need an e-learning or I need a video. Like, okay, well, our job, not only as, learning and development specialists, but as project, managers, is to figure out, well, why do we need an e-learning? Why do we think that's needed? What is the actual root cause? What's the real problem we're trying to solve for? And so a lot of times that consultation I end up having with my clients is kind of walking them back from a solution to better understand what's really going on. What's the root cause? Is there a problem? Is that problem like related to human, performance? And then is learning the right solution? Sometimes there might be a problem, but learning isn't really needed. Maybe it can be solved through maybe just sending a simple communication or an email. So that's really key because it also will ultimately save you time in deciding like what projects that you need to take on. And that kind of segues into my second tip about you're always going to be managing the three constraints, time, scope, and resources. Very rarely do you ever have the ideal situation where you have all the time in the world and all the resources that you need and the scope that never changes. As other panelists have said, that scope changes frequently. A lot of my projects that I work on, I say this very often.
Hi, baby.
That when I come in,
I know I was on an advising session when you called me.
well, I think someone is speaking. Okay, are you guys able to hear me? Okay, great, thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, and Colleen, can you put that into presentation mode so it's just a little bigger for us old people?
Of course, let me see. Here we go, where we go, share slideshow from current slide. Boom, there you go, is that better?
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, yes, so like scope changes very frequently in my line of work. So I like to say that what my work week looks like on Monday is completely different by the time I get to Friday. Like everything has changed. My expectations about projects going into say like the next week, very different from what I was expecting coming into work on that Monday. So flexibility, I think, is very much a key skill. Adaptability, just kind of being willing to go with the flow. Amazon operates at a very, very high speed. And it's just, you have to be used to being comfortable with the uncomfortable, asking questions and being able to, I think outside the box and come up with solutions pretty much on the fly. And part of that is also, like I say here, how do you prioritize your work? A lot of times you'll always get way more work than you actually have time to get to. And so that's key, is figuring out, okay, well, what's really important? Where's the best value, not only for your own time and effort, but then also for your company or your client. I have another slide I'll share with you in a little bit, but I have a decision matrix that helps me figure out like what projects to get involved with and how to prioritize them based off of the size of the project. That includes reach, like how many learners are involved. Is it like 10 people, or are we talking about like 10,000? That's a big difference. Time, how much time or effort it's going to take me to do the project, and then the criticality of need. How important is it to the business that this project gets addressed? So I'll share that in the next slide. The other point is that relationships really are key. You don't operate, on an island, on a silo. So building those relationships and building trust with your clients, with your partners, is absolutely key if you want to be successful in any role, whether that's project management or instructional designer, etc. I look at it as trying to view my clients as partners, so that I don't want to like dictate to them saying this is the solution, this is what we're going to do. Instead, I try to bring them into that conversation, and if I can't, give them the ideal or like option A, then I try to give them other ones. Let's talk about option B or option C. And I feel that the feedback I've received from my clients has been very positive. They like that they feel as if they're involved and they're part of the decision-making process. It also can give them more of a stake involved in the learning solution than they probably otherwise would have. Because sometimes when I started out, I felt that some of my clients were like, I don't care what it is, just like fix the problem. But now I have established really good relationships with a lot of my clients, and I find that we work together. We try to identify problems early, and we work together to come up with the best solution. So relationships and fostering those relationships. And then the final tip is you always want to keep the outcomes in mind. How are you going to know if the project that you've committed all this time and effort into actually was a success? How do your clients know if it was a success? And then again, that goes back to that initial, key tip that you see here. What's the problem? What's the root cause? What are we trying to solve for? And so thinking about how do I know if the problem's been solved? How do I know if learning, was successful? Was there a change in the learner behavior or performance because of the learning event? And so trying to think of ways to identify, track, and then visualize, that data is key. So that not only do you know, but then your clients know. And then if the outcomes weren't so great, and this can be long-term. I've had projects where, for example, there was a series of, it was a brand new product that was being put out. We didn't know if people would know how to use it. So we created a series of interactive, user guides. Fast forward 6 months, and by that point in time, the product was being used by over 500,000 people. But when I ran the data, I found that I think the highest number of downloads for any of those user guides, I think was like less than 20 unique users. So 20 people out of 500,000, that was really helpful in facilitating the conversation with my clients to say, hey, we don't really need to continue to support this type of documentation because people aren't using it. And so my clients were much more comfortable with, deprecating those user guides than they were prior to having that data. So this is just the decision matrix. This is the one I've created for my own projects, just based off of my own, my program that I run and its unique needs. You guys are, free to use this if you want as like a guide or a template, and you can, adjust it to fit your own project needs, and I'll share this, the PowerPoint with everybody so that you'll have this. And then just really quickly, because just for the sake of time, these are some key skills and just some tools that I see learning teams across Amazon use quite frequently. So just wanted to share that with you. Number one is have a portfolio. That's really huge. If there's any way that you can show what the work that you've done, please do so, because we really want to see that. I know sometimes if you have proprietary or confidential data, it can be difficult. And that's when I suggest you can either blur out, the information you don't want to share, or create a mock-up of something similar to what your final product looked like, so that people have an idea. Data is huge at Amazon. So on your resume, if there's any way to just qualify or quantify your achievements, it really helps to add an additional level of context that otherwise would be, we wouldn't know. This is just just as an FYI, Amazon does use the STAR method for its interviews. This is an FYI. So that's the idea of where we ask. So if we look for what was the situation, what was your task, what was the action that you took, and then what was the result. So if you guys are ever, and this can be used beyond Amazon, if you're thinking about like when you do your interviews, like how do I prepare for answering questions. I think the STAR method is a really good way to kind of frame what you've done, and to give the interviewer a really good like snippet, or so they get a really good idea of what you've done. Addie, we all know Addie. We look for people, even with the learning, project manager, it's really important to know Addie in addition to just the general, project management cycle. Agile, if you're going to work with tech teams, you have to be very agile, very quick. So if you know the Agile methodology, again, people skills is really huge. And then you can see the list of tools I have here. I don't have to go through all of them, but these are ones that my team uses, and a lot of learning teams at Amazon use. I just picked some of like the more popular ones. And XAPI is, if you're not familiar with it, you can take some courses online for free, or just look up about it. But it's another way to gather and track data in terms of like really granular level what your learners are doing, and it's something that a lot of learning teams at Amazon are using to try to answer that question of what are our learners doing, and were our projects successful? All right.
Okay, sorry, I had to step away, child situation. So there are a couple questions, and I think we'll start from the one I saw. How do you manage scope creep? And that can go out to all the panelists. Colleen, if you want to start.
Yeah, scope creep. That's what I've learned. What is for me is that it's really helpful at the beginning of a project to in your learning plan or your project plan to just very clearly lay out, here's what's in scope, here's what's out of scope, here's the agreed upon set of deliverables, and then make sure you get that sign off from your stakeholders, so that if there's a scope change in the future, you can go back to that document and say, and it really does kind of help remind your clients what you guys agreed to, and it can just really help that conversation. I also really recommend knowing like what your own boundaries are when you're working with clients, and then making sure you set those boundaries, set those expectations from day one, from the start, and then keep those boundaries in place. That's really key. It's because otherwise, if you make it's not, and you have to use your best judgment. There are always exceptions, right? There might be really good reasons why you might need to change your project approach. But I would say I would urge caution with that, because then you could be setting up expectations in the future where your clients think, well, if I just push hard enough, then I can get them to do what I want. And then you'll end up working like, twice as many hours just to try to get stuff done. So anyway, that would be my recommendation.
Annie, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would definitely say about if the goal or keeping the goal and objective very, very clear from the start. And when things start derailing or coming off of that, kindly and gently pulling them back and saying, this is not in alignment with where we had originally set and where we're intending to go. But keeping the conversation going to remind and to hold that boundary of, is this ultimately in line with where we are, or does the goal need to change some, but also being respectful of your own time, because ultimately, you are kind of the timekeeper on the project and making sure that things move along as they should while delivering a product that is what was expected or that meets the criteria and the standards they were looking for.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to add anything?
I don't have anything that's wildly different from what's already been said, except to just add that, I think if a change actually is going to make things significantly better, you do have to have some process where you can determine whether that change is worth a change in the other aspects, which is time and costs, right? Because we're generally talking about some improvement to quality, and so you just have to hopefully quickly manage that and decide whether it's worth it to move forward, or maybe that's, hey, we're gonna start thinking about round 2 now a little bit and put it off, or never do it at all, right?
Thank you all. So we have another question. Do you have baseline data that you use when planning the project, such as review times, development hours for different types of delivery, ILT, virtual, or e-learning? I'll start with Mike. Keeping you all the panelists on their toes.
Yeah, that's good. You know, honestly, in the environment I'm in, we don't have a lot of that. I mean, we have experience from previous projects, but we don't. We're a little loosier goosier, as it were, in that process in higher ed sometimes. But because we're not as bottom line focused as industry. So I'm going to say no, and I'm really sorry I don't have something better for you.
I think this question really kind of showcases the different industries. You know, Annie, do you want to add anything?
I don't really have a whole lot to add. Ours is very case by case. So, you know, we try not to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, and take a project and spin it in a new way that may have already been completed, just to, you know, improve time management. But no.
Colleen?
Yeah, actually, so we have a lot of baseline data at Amazon, and my team in particular. The projects that I run are run on a fairly regular basis, to the point where I can automatically, I know based on the deliverable and the time frame how much dev effort it's going to take. For my team at large, we have we call it we have our project t-shirt sizing. For extra small, medium, large, extra large projects, which we have a bank of hours. A small project might be I don't know, 10 to 20 hours, or extra small 10 to 20 hours or something, and then where the extra large is over 200 hours. So we track our hours. We do end up having that baseline, that which, when we're having our consultation with our clients and we know what the deliverables are going to be and roughly what the scope of the project is, we use that t-shirt sizing chart to figure out resourcing, how many people need to be assigned to the project, and the timeline.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost it. So I think this is more probably to Annie, but I mean to Colleen, but if Annie and Mike, if you've used this, please chime in. Could you please talk more on how Agile is being used in instructional design? Is there any specific Agile methods being used, like Kanban or SOF? You seem to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So it really depends on the team. I'll tell you this: Amazon is huge, and so different teams will have different approaches. But because a lot of what we're doing is ultimately product based, and so you need learning involved in that. Agile is ends up kind of becoming, it's like some weird hybrid thing that I work with the traditional ADDIE approach. There are learning teams that are really, really agile, and then there are others that are not quite so much. But I can give you an example. The projects that I work on, because I partner very closely with with the tech team, they run on 6-week cycles and go through, from the product side, there's 2 dev sprints, and then there's a period of sit followed by UAT testing, and then to push out to go live. Learnings overlap with that begins approximately the sit phase. So it's we're looking at about 2 weeks out from go live. So we have to move very, very quickly. From a learning perspective, what I've done to try to manage that in terms of like scalability is just looking at opportunity, like templatizing, looking at opportunities to like reuse materials, and then going back to what I said earlier about having a really close partnership with your clients, because that's yeah, key.
So, and I think this goes out to all the panelists. Do you use any tools to manage your projects, such as Excel project, or I think, you know, I've seen a Gantt, and I think there's a plethora of tools out there. We'll start with Mike.
Well, I mean, tools, I mean, we've just been pretty basic. We use Trello boards and things like that to track things. We don't do a lot of Gantt charts because we're usually in the midst of, and this was one of the things I was going to mention in my presentation and I failed to, is learning to manage multiple projects, because even with the most experienced project managers that I've worked with, where we seldom would, when we were trying to do project timelines and stuff like that, we seldom take into consideration what everybody else is already working on. And so we'd have conflicting project plans going on, which didn't always help. So I'm curious, I'll just throw this back out to everybody, if they know of any good tools that help you manage that, like the time that people have already committed in a week, and that helps you manage that tricky process. I'd love to hear, because I'm always looking for new things. So I guess that's another skill, is constantly be learning.
Yeah, and I think in the education sector, sometimes it's hard to get those project management tools. Annie, do you?
We kind of live by Microsoft Teams at this point, and Gantt charts. But again, for my work, us having all of our calendars shared so that we can constantly see what everyone is working on of every day, so that we can pop in and out, has been helpful. But again, that figuring out of time management when you're already so committed and trying to move something forward, I don't have we don't have that nailed down yet either.
And Colleen, thanks for sharing that Icon Logic tool. Do you all use anything specific at Amazon? I mean,
it varies by team. I think, that there's still we're still waiting for that one perfect, tool to be developed. So anybody on the call, if you've got the time and the, and the passion for it, here's a big problem you can solve. But we use Quip, like on an individual level, just to kind of I have this Quip spreadsheet that I use. But we also use a lot of just internally developed tools. So I can't share those with you guys, but we have tools to manage intake requests, triaging, assigning it, and then it also bubbles up to dashboards for our managers to see who's doing what, and just across team resources, what capacity we're at.
okay, so we have a few questions left. We'll try to get through as many as we can. How to best address the need for EI competence as we academically prepare new IDs. And I'm really not sure what EI competence is.
Emotional intelligence is,
Okay, thanks.
yeah.
So Mike, since you spoke up.
Yeah, I guess shame on me for doing that. No, I mean, there's some great books out there on that. So I think that's one way. I don't, I mean, obviously we can use, case studies, books like Crucial Conversations, if you're familiar with that. I recommended a couple to Suzanne already, like Humble Inquiry by Sheen. What's his first name? Oh man, sorry, I just lost it. Edgar Sheen, Schein. Great book. And also Change Your Questions, Change Your Lives by Mara Lee Adams are some great ones. And so just getting people looking at situations where EI, where somebody's being emotionally intelligent and others where they're not, can easily help you see the importance of it. And then learning to from some of these other books on how to interact better, how to create a safe space when you're having tough conversations with people, and things like that. I love Brene Brown's work as well. So I would recommend some stuff there, and then just practicing, right? So I'll be quiet and let the others speak.
Annie?
When it comes to emotional intelligence, this might not, I would say the biggest thing is getting to know your own self, and doing the work on yourself and becoming more of a, becoming more aware of what is going on with you and making sure to take a pause and increase the space of that pause before you go and interact with another. So if someone says something, and you feel yourself having a reaction to it, actually taking the time to stop, be more aware, look at the entire situation, and then actually respond. I don't think enough credence oftentimes is given to the impact of that pause and stepping back and looking out. But again, Brene Brown's work is honestly where I dove into this a lot, reading her books and coming into, really getting curious about yourself and what's going on there, so that then you can also be curious instead of highly judgmental of another person that could result in more conflict.
Colleen, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, not too much. When it comes to like the emotional intelligence stuff, like specifically, a lot of our leadership takes, courses, training, et cetera, around that. My team, some of that has trickled down to us at an individual level, but mainly it's just been, if you're interested in like self-assessment, seeing where you are, just go out and do that yourself. Again, Amazon has internal tools that we use where we're able to get feedback, from our peers that can also help gauge us on how we're doing, particularly when it comes to emotional intelligence and, earning trust with others.
And we probably have time for one more question. I think there's an interesting side conversation going on about whether PMP has a place in the world of ID. But that I'm going to actually ask the panelists, all three of you, and we'll start with Annie this time. How do you get more out of an underperforming colleague or colleagues? And I think none of us have ever experienced that. So this will be totally hypothetical.
Never, never. Definitely speaking directly with that person, being willing to have those really blunt, honest conversations, but majorly putting in task goals just for them, that, you know, and kind of keeping it as a contract between the two of you of where do you go, how do you get there, here's what needs to be done, and often getting really, really detailed in what they have to do in order to bring their productivity up, and holding them accountable. And of course, this is where, you know, positive influence is really, really, really key. This is where being very positive and that you see them, but also still holding them accountable when things aren't going well, when they're starting to slip again. And ultimately holding to your standard. If you said that you were going to do something and there was going to be this action after the fact, then you have to follow through. If you don't follow through, then, you know, you start to lose respect within your team. Not to mention within the entity, and your boundaries have been violated as well. So the detailed accountability and positive affirmations.
Colleen?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, +1 to what Annie said. I mean, it really is key again to, we have to like know what the expectations are. You know, what are the roles? What are the roles, responsibilities? It's really key in having that defined, so that there really is no question or gray area. And then like what Annie said, just being direct, you know, with the person, and then especially if you're the project lead, then you need to, if for whatever reason they're still underperforming, they're just not getting the work done, sometimes that might involve, and talking to them directly isn't working, and asking them, hey, what's going on? Sometimes you may have to escalate to their manager, and then whatever those consequences are, you just have to hold to them. If you do tell them, like, if X, you know, like she said, like, if this if this happens, then this is the consequence, and you need to be able to follow through on that.
And I know sometimes the follow through in government and corporate industry can be different than education, but Mike?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I would just add, going back to something I mentioned in my presentation about like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You might want to find out, you know, why. Of course, I mean, that comes out in the conversation that both Annie and Colleen have talked about. But if you can determine why what was done wasn't done right, because sometimes it may be that a person just hasn't bought in yet into what's going on, or they may have been given something that they are asked to do that they're not fully competent to do, and so it might be getting them on board with the purpose of the project and what the team as a whole is trying to accomplish, and that can get you part of the way there. Other times it can be that they need some help, and so if you can get them help, then that's the case. It might also be that maybe the expectations weren't clearly communicated, you know, so you got to before you know, just assuming that somebody's lazy, or and not that they said that, but before the assumption that they just are blowing people off or lazy or whatever, find out the why behind why it didn't get done, and then work with them to overcome that. And sometimes that's going to be hold their feet to the fire. There's going to be consequences, and yes, you know, you may have to push it up, but once you understand that why, then you can help them get through that.
So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and just in lieu of time, special thanks to Colleen and Mike and Annie for sharing all of their experience and knowledge with us. So thank you all for coming. Colleen, would you mind sharing your slide deck in the chat with me when you have a second? And so just one last reminder, I know you all again are working on some great projects. We really would love to see what you're working on. If you want to submit like a proposal, I'll be sending out the webinar with the link where the proposal is. It's due at the end of this month. And we hope that maybe we can see you all, hopefully we can see people face to face in November. Thank you.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you so much.
Colleen, if you just want to if you don't mind emailing them, then I can, I'm going to send a follow-up email out.
All right, perfect. I'll do that. All right, thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. We really appreciate all the knowledge and wealth and your time.
Of course, of course. Always happy to do that.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.